Here is what nobody in the conversation about women and intimacy ever says clearly enough. After 40, a woman's relationship with touch changes completely, not slightly, not gradually, completely. The things that felt good in her 20s, the approach that worked in her 30s, none of that is the full picture anymore. Her nervous system has shifted, her body has different thresholds, her emotional architecture has been rebuilt by a decade or two of experience, and what she needs to feel safe, present, and genuinely connected before anything else happens is something so specific, so consistent, and so completely overlooked that most men have no idea it even exists. This video is about that, about where she actually wants to be reached first and why getting that right changes everything that comes after. Let's start with a number that should reset this entire conversation. According to a 2022 survey published by the AARP, over 60% of women over 40 reported that emotional attunement, feeling genuinely seen and acknowledged before physical contact, was the single most important factor in their experience of intimacy. Not attraction, not appearance, not chemistry in the initial flash of lightning sense, the felt experience of being recognized, of having someone arrive at them, at the actual person they are, not the surface version, before anything physical begins. 60%. That is not a minority preference. That is the majority of women in this age group communicating through research data, something that most men in their lives have never been directly told. And here's the part that makes this genuinely urgent. The women who reported this weren't describing a nice to have. They were describing a prerequisite, a threshold condition, the thing that has to be present before everything else can mean what it's supposed to mean. Without it, physical touch, no matter how technically correct, lands differently, registers as less, feels incomplete in a way she might not immediately be able to articulate but will absolutely feel. Now, here is what makes women over 40 specifically different from women at earlier life stages and why this topic deserves its own conversation. By the time a woman reaches her 40s, she has accumulated something that genuinely changes her neurology. Not just her preferences or her opinions about what she wants, her actual neurological wiring. Research from the field of developmental psychology describes what happens in midlife as a process of self-consolidation, a settling into identity that produces clarity about needs, higher sensitivity to inauthenticity, and a significantly lower tolerance for being approached in ways that don't match who she actually is. Dr. Lisa Diamond, a researcher at the University of Utah, whose work on adult attachment and desire has been widely cited, has documented that women in midlife show stronger and more consistent connections between emotional safety and physical desire than younger women do. The neural pathway between I feel genuinely seen and I feel genuinely open becomes more established, not less, with age and experience. It doesn't weaken, it deepens. So what does this mean in practice? It means that touch, real touch, the kind that lands and resonates and opens rather than closes, for a woman over 40 starts somewhere that isn't physical at all. It starts in a place most men have never been taught to reach. And by the time we're done with this video, you're going to understand exactly where that place is, why it matters more than anything else, and what the research says about how to get there. There are 3 layers to this. Each one builds on the previous. And I need to tell you up front that the 3rd layer is where most men are consistently missing the mark without any idea that they're doing it. It's the layer that feels the most optional from the outside and is the most essential from the inside. We'll get there. But we have to build the foundation first. This is the foundation. And it is not metaphorical. It is neurobiological. The human nervous system operates in 2 primary modes: threat response and rest and connect. In threat mode, which is activated by stress, anxiety, unresolved tension, or simply the feeling of not being emotionally safe, the body's resources are redirected away from openness and toward protection. Muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallower, sensory perception narrows. The capacity for genuine pleasure and connection drops significantly. because the nervous system has correctly identified that this is not the moment for either. In rest and connect mode, which is activated by safety, familiarity, genuine warmth, and the felt sense of being in the presence of someone who can be trusted, the opposite happens. The body opens, sensation becomes richer, presence becomes possible, and touch in this state lands in a completely different register than it does in threat mode. For women over 40, this distinction matters more than it ever has. Here's why. By midlife, most women have experienced enough relational disappointment, enough instances of being approached in ways that didn't honor who they are, enough moments of physical contact that felt hollow or instrumental, that the nervous system has become more discerning, more calibrated. It takes the threat versus safety determination more seriously because it has more data. It has years of pattern recognition to draw from. And the result is a lower threshold for detecting inauthenticity and a higher requirement for genuine safety before openness becomes available. Researcher Stephen Porges, whose polyvagal theory revolutionized our understanding of how the autonomic nervous system governs social behavior, describes this dynamic precisely. His research established that the nervous system is constantly and automatically scanning the environment for cues of safety and threat, a process he calls neuroception. And crucially, this scanning operates below conscious awareness. She doesn't decide to feel safe or unsafe. Her nervous system makes that assessment before she's consciously processed anything. What does a nervous system in safety mode actually need to see? Consistency, predictability, tone of voice that matches facial expression that matches behavior, eye contact that is warm rather than evaluating, physical proximity that is offered rather than assumed, the absence of urgency, the presence of patience. These are not romantic gestures exactly. They are neurological inputs, sensory information that the nervous system processes and uses to make its determination about whether this is a safe place to open. This is why the first touch that matters for a woman over 40 is often not physical at all in the way people typically mean. It's the quality of presence that precedes physical contact, the way someone arrives in the space with her before anything else happens, the way they make the environment feel safe and unhurried and genuinely attuned to her specifically, not to a general idea of a woman, but to her. When that is present, the nervous system shifts, and everything else becomes possible that wasn't possible before. This next part sounds philosophical until you understand the neuroscience, and then it sounds like the most practical thing in the world. A woman over 40 has a relationship with her own identity that is qualitatively different from what it was at 25 or 30. The research on midlife identity development, going back to Erik Erikson's foundational work and carried forward by contemporary developmental psychologists, consistently shows that by midlife, most women have achieved what researchers call ego integrity, a settled, clarified sense of who they are, what they value, and what they will and won't accommodate in their lives. This is not rigidity, it's clarity, and it produces a very specific need in intimate contexts, the need to be approached as a whole and specific person, not as a generic object of attraction. Here's what this looks like in practical terms. When a woman over 40 is in a developing, intimate connection, and the man she's with references something specific about her, not a compliment about her appearance, but recognition of something particular to who she actually is, something happens in her brain that has been documented in neuroimaging research. The brain's reward circuitry activates, oxytocin releases, the felt sense of safety increases. And all of this happens because her sense of self has been acknowledged rather than bypassed. Dr. Arthur Aaron's research on closeness and intimacy, which has generated some of the most replicated findings in relationship psychology, consistently demonstrates that the experience of being known, of having specific, particular aspects of oneself recognized and valued, is among the most powerful generators of genuine connection and desire. Not admiration in the general sense, recognition in the specific sense. For a woman over 40, this is not optional, it is the first touch. The moment someone arrives at who she actually is, Her specific humor, her particular way of seeing things, the values she has spent decades clarifying before arriving anywhere physical, something opens. The nervous system receives it as a signal of genuine attunement. And genuine attunement is neurologically and experientially the precondition for everything else. Here is the version of this that gets most consistently missed. Men in intimate contexts with women over 40 often invest significant effort in physical attentiveness while investing almost no effort in the specific kind of recognition we're describing. They are physically present and physically generous, but mentally arriving at a general woman rather than this specific person. And she feels that gap with remarkable precision because the nervous system that has become calibrated by decades of experience is very good at distinguishing between he finds me attractive and he finds me specifically compelling. The first is nice. The second is what opens the door. This is why conversation, real, unhurried, genuinely curious conversation, is not a preamble to intimacy for a woman over 40. It is intimacy. It is the first and most important form of touch available. The conversation that says, I am genuinely interested in who you specifically are, does something to her sense of self that registers as being touched at its most essential level. And women know the difference between a man who is going through conversational motions to get somewhere else and a man who is genuinely there, every single time, without exception. Because the nervous system is reading cues she isn't even consciously processing, and it reports back with a clarity that cannot be argued with. Now we get to the physical dimension, but with the understanding that everything in this layer only works because layers 1 and 2 are already in place. This is not a standalone section. It is the completion of a sequence. And the sequence matters as much as the content. When emotional safety is present and the sense of self has been genuinely acknowledged, the body of a woman over 40 becomes available in a way that has specific, documented characteristics. The research is clear and consistent on this. Physical sensitivity actually increases with age in women who feel emotionally safe rather than decreasing as is commonly assumed. A study published in the Journal of Sex Research found that women in midlife and beyond who reported high levels of emotional connection with their partners showed significantly heightened physical sensitivity and responsiveness compared to women in the same age group who reported lower emotional connection. The variable was not age. The variable was emotional safety. Age by itself was not the determining factor. Connection was. This finding challenges the cultural narrative almost completely. The assumption is that physical sensitivity diminishes with age. The research shows it doesn't. It changes its requirements. It needs a different foundation to activate fully. And that foundation is everything we covered in layers 1 and 2. So where does she want to be touched first, physically, when the foundation is solid? The answer, according to both research and the consistent reports of women in this demographic, is not where most men assume. It is not the most obvious answer. The places women over 40 identify most consistently as the first physical contact that resonates, that signals genuine attunement, that activates the full cascade of openness and connection, are the ones associated with care and recognition rather than urgency. The face, specifically the jaw and temples, where touch communicates, I am paying attention to you specifically. The back of the neck and the base of the skull, where the nervous system concentrates and where touch that is slow and deliberate produces the most profound parasympathetic response. The hands, held, not grabbed, where the gesture communicates patience and the absence of agenda. The upper back, between the shoulder blades, where a steady hand communicates stability and presence. These are not arbitrary preferences. They are neurologically significant contact points. The vagus nerve, which runs from the brainstem down through the body and is the primary carrier of the parasympathetic nervous system's rest and connect signals, has significant surface expression in the neck and back. Touch to these areas, when it is slow and intentional, directly activates the neurological pathway associated with safety, openness, and genuine presence. Neuroscientist David Linden, whose research on the neuroscience of touch has produced some of the field's most accessible and widely read scholarship, describes what he calls affective touch, slow, warm, skin contact touch that activates C-tactile nerve fibers and produces neurochemical responses fundamentally different from those produced by faster, more purposive physical contact. Affective touch communicates care. It signals to the nervous system that the person delivering it is attuned to the receiver's experience rather than focused on their own. And for a woman over 40 whose nervous system has become expert at detecting the difference between these two states of being, affective touch is the physical language that completes the sentence that emotional safety and genuine recognition began. The speed matters. The pressure matters. The absence of urgency matters. Touch that arrives slowly, that is warm rather than demanding, that takes its cues from her response rather than its own agenda. This is the physical expression of everything that preceded it. It is the body continuing the conversation that the nervous system and the sense of self already began. And this is what most men miss. Not because they don't care, but because they've never understood that physical touch is the third layer of a sequence, not the first move. The men who arrive at layer 3, having genuinely inhabited layers 1 and 2, find that everything they do physically lands differently, resonates more, opens more, not because they've changed the physical gestures, but because the context in which those gestures arrive has been completely transformed. Here is what this entire video comes down to. A woman over 40 does not want to be touched. First and foremost, in any physical location, she wants to be touched in her sense of safety, then in her sense of self. Then, and only after both of those have been genuinely established in the physical places where the nervous system concentrates and where affective touch produces the neurochemical cascade of connection and openness. This is not a complicated protocol. It is a sequence. Safety, then recognition, then presence. The nervous system first, then the specific person, then the body. In that order, every time. The reason most men get this wrong is not cruelty or indifference. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of where a woman over 40 is actually located. She is not primarily a physical body waiting to be approached correctly. She is a nervous system with decades of calibration, a self with decades of clarity, and a body that responds most fully to the man who understands both of those things before he reaches for either. When the sequence is right, when safety comes first, recognition comes second, and physical touch arrives into a space that has already been prepared by everything preceding it, what happens is not just physically different. It is experientially different. It is the difference between touch that is felt and touch that is received, between contact that happens to the body and contact that arrives at the person. She has always known this. She has always felt the difference between the two. Now you understand why. Before you go, there is one more thing that connects directly to everything we just covered, and missing it would leave a significant gap in this conversation. Everything in this video assumed a context that has already developed, an existing connection, a space where layers 1 and 2 have been built over time. But what about the earlier moments? What about the specific signals she sends when she wants physical closeness? Before the deeper intimacy we discussed today, before the sequence is fully established. When attraction is present and building and her body is already communicating something her words aren't ready to say, because here is what's true. The sequence we covered today has a beginning that looks very different from where we started, and recognizing the signals she sends at that beginning, reading the moment when she is moving toward wanting something, is the skill that makes everything else possible. That is exactly what the video on your screen right now covers completely. It's called She Wants You to Kiss Her. Watch for this. It goes back to the moment before the sequence begins. The behavioral signals, the body language, the specific nonverbal communication a woman sends when desire is present and building and she is waiting to be met. The triangular gaze, the proximity drift, the unjustified touch. the charged silence that is asking something without using a single word. Today's video gave you the foundation. That video gives you the beginning, and the beginning is where everything either starts or doesn't. It's right there on your screen. Watch it now.